Hi, in today's lesson we're going to be learning about the present perfect continuous. You're going to learn how and when to use it, and most importantly, how it differs from the present perfect simple. Keep watching until the end, as there'll be some exercises to see how much you've learnt. So let's get started. Firstly, let's remind ourselves of the form of the two tenses. The present perfect continuous is formed with have or has plus been plus the ing form of the verb. For the present perfect simple, we use either have or has plus the past participle. Now let's look at when to use the two tenses. There are similarities between the present perfect continuous and the present perfect simple. Most importantly, they both link the past to the present. Both the present perfect continuous and the present perfect simple are used to describe events which started in the past and have continued up to the present, or are activities which have stopped recently. So how do you know when to use the present perfect continuous and when to use the present perfect simple? Let's look at the differences between them. The most important difference is that the present perfect continuous is used when we want to focus on the unfinished activity. So let's look at a timeline. Here we have now, and this is the past. So I've been fixing the car, and that's why I'm dirty. The action started in the past and is unfinished, whereas we use the present perfect simple to focus on the finished result. I fixed the car. On the timeline, we can see that the action started in the past, is complete, and has an impact on the present. It means I finished fixing it and can now do something else. We are focusing on the result. Or I have been decorating the sitting room. That's why I'm still in my overalls. We are using the present perfect continuous because we want to focus on the unfinished action, the decorating. Whereas if you use the present perfect simple and say, I've painted the sitting room blue, here you're focusing on the result. The sitting room is now blue, the activity is finished, and we can see the result. The present perfect continuous suggests that something is unfinished, whereas the present perfect simple gives the idea of completion. Another example would be, I've been reading that book that you lent me. I've got one more chapter to read. Whereas if we use the present perfect simple, we'd say, I've read that book you lent me. I finished it yesterday. The present perfect continuous emphasizes the unfinished action. In other words, you've not finished reading the book, whereas the present perfect simple emphasizes the finished result. You've read the book, you finished it yesterday. Secondly, we use the present perfect continuous to talk about how long something has been happening. For example, I've been learning English for 5 years. So this is how long it's been going on. It's a continuing, a duration. So we use the present perfect continuous. Whereas the present perfect simple tells you how much of an activity is complete. For instance, she's answered 10 emails. This is implying also that these emails are completed. It's a finished action. We also use the present perfect continuous when we want to emphasize that something is happening over a period of unfinished time. For example, my English teacher says, my English has been improving since I started reading in English. Whereas we use the present perfect simple to talk about how often or how many times something has happened. I've called several times today, but she hasn't answered the phone. We can also use the present perfect continuous to show that something is temporary. So, for example, I usually work in London, but I've been working in Birmingham for the last 4 weeks. Whereas the present perfect simple is used to talk about how long when we view something as permanent. So I've worked here for 30 years. In your mind, you're seeing that as a long-term or a permanent state. So also there are some verbs that can be used with either the present perfect continuous or the present perfect simple with little difference in meaning. These verbs are usually verbs that describe activities which normally happen over a period of time. So for instance, live, study, wait, work. These all happen over a period of time. They're not completed in a short time. For example, Martin has been working in England for 2 years. Is very similar to saying Martin has worked in England for 2 years. They mean the same, and yet we could use either tense. So let's recap. Remember, the present perfect continuous is used to focus on the unfinished activity, and the present perfect simple is used to focus on the finished result. Secondly, we use the present perfect continuous to talk about how long something has been happening, and the present perfect simple tells you how much of an activity is complete. Thirdly, we use the present perfect continuous when we want to emphasize something happening over a period of unfinished time, whereas the present perfect simple is used to talk about how often or how many times something has happened. And lastly, we can use the present perfect continuous to show that something is temporary, whereas the present perfect simple is to talk about how long when we view something as permanent. So now it's your turn. Complete the gap with the verb in either the present perfect continuous or the present perfect simple. 1. I blank friends, so I haven't spoken to my mum yet today. I have been visiting. Here we're focusing on the action visiting, so we use the present perfect continuous. 2. My mum blank me to tidy my room several times. Has asked. The present perfect simple is used to say how many times something has happened. 3. I blank the kitchen, so what would you like me to clean next? Have cleaned. Here we use the present perfect simple as we're focusing on the finished result. It's a completed action. You've finished cleaning the kitchen. 4. Our neighbour blank the drums for the last 3 hours and it's driving me crazy. Here we're talking about how long something has been happening, so we use the present perfect continuous. Our neighbour has been playing the drums. 5. Congratulations, you blanked the exam with really high marks. Have passed. Here we use the present perfect simple because we're talking about a finished result. And congratulations to you guys too. You now know the difference between the present perfect continuous and the present perfect simple. Please remember to like this video if you found it useful, share it with your friends and colleagues learning English, and remember to subscribe to my channel Oxford English Now for more free English language videos out every Friday. Thank you for watching.